All right, let's start again. I think I was on mute. Okay, thank goodness for dear hubby who can clue you in on those things. So, hey everybody, this is the Let's Go Sew live show where sewing enthusiasts gather to be inspired and learn to make the most of their machines. So tonight is Q&A night. I usually do on the fourth Monday of every month a live show with a guest, and I'm wrapping up this year with going solo and answering your great questions. So I got some fabulous, fabulous questions, and I am really, really looking forward to sharing the answers with you tonight. So let me know if you can hear me now. Let me check here. I see Clovis, I see Marjorie, Cheryl, Celeste, Lorraine, Bonnie, Evelyn, and a bunch of you were telling me I had no sound. Janice, thank you. Josie Sews, Lucy, Meta, Margaret, Darlene, Alice, Linda, Star Raymond, Mary, Margot, Barb, Sally, Sheila, Connie, Sharon. Welcome all of you tonight. I'm so happy to have you. Arnell, good to see you, Arnell, Connie, Becky. All right. This is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So I know quite a few of you sent in questions, and thank you for the thumbs up on the sound is good, Sharon. I appreciate that. I am using new software tonight. So if you have been following me on these live shows before, I've been using a different software to do the interviews, but I'm starting with something new tonight. So I might have a few a few bumps in the road, but hopefully it'll go as planned and it'll be smooth as silk. That's what we want all of our sewing to be, right? Smooth as silk. So I'm going to start by just telling you that I did get lots and lots and lots of questions. In fact, I got so many that I will not be able to cover them all tonight. So I snatched from the list and kind of grouped them together. And I want you to know, first off, that there will be a part 2 on this coming up. I'm preparing a part 2, and the part 2 will have a lot of embroidery techniques and a lot of machine embroidery tips built into that show. Okay. Hi, Ann. Hi, Mary. Hi, Karen. Hi, Betty. Again, it's so great to see all of you here tonight. So from all over the place, we've got Debbie here is from Ontario, and MD Denise is here from Rhode Island. Mary, where are you from, Mary? California, Knott's Berry Farm. How cool is that? And Mickey's here from California. Very good. And Celeste, I appreciate your comment. You know me, I love answering questions, and I love finding answers to those that are quite challenging at times. So I kind of thrive on that. So no, never be afraid to shoot me a question, and I'm happy to answer. So again, tonight is Q&A night. It is December 27th, 2021. And this is going to be a great show. If you're watching it live, I'm thrilled to have you here. If you're watching on the replay, thank you for watching. I hope that if you like this broadcast, you will consider subscribing if you have not already to the Let's Go Sew with Joanne Banco channel, and that you would also hit that like button. That really helps a lot if you can hit that like button. You've heard it 1,000 times from everybody else, but it is absolutely true. So Susie QB Sewin, what a cute name is that, from Oklahoma. Great to have you. I see Carrie is here. Hey, Carrie, good to have you here tonight. And April, Anita is here from Southern California. And Janice, you are always welcome to be here, and I really appreciate all your feedback that you give me on just about every show that comes along. So I appreciate that from all of you. If you can let me know what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to learn more about, that helps me direct those things to be able to help you so that you can have happy sewing in every day of your sewing life. All right, we've got Lois here from Arizona. Very good. Excellent. So again, I can see your comments rolling in. I will do my best to keep up on them. I am only broadcasting on YouTube, and so you can feel free to chat with each other while you're here, get to know each other, and it's really fun when you're able to interact with everybody else that's visiting here and maybe answer some questions that come up in the chat if you know an answer, or if you want to contribute any kind of additional answers to what I'm saying here too. So, well, thank you, MS Denise. I really appreciate that. It's my thing. So I hope to help. All right, now I'm going to start with kind of a list of the questions, and I'll let them go ahead and come up on the screen while I explain things. So I may be showing you some things right on camera, and then I'll also be showing you some things through a picture so that you can see some things that I put together previously. So we're going to start with Connie from Kirkland, Washington. And Connie wants to know how I organize my threads. Well, truth be told, it's a work in progress. I have a lot of thread, and recently I acquired a whole new collection of the Designs in Machine Embroidery exquisite threads. So those are what you see hanging up behind me there on the thread rack. I got a whole thread rack with I believe there's 60 colors on there, the most popular colors that they have. And I do also use Brother thread. I am a Brother ambassador, and I love the Brother products, but you can never have too many threads and too many shades and too many spools. And so I like to keep a real mixture on hand. Most of my threads that I use for embroidery are going to be stored like you see there on a rack. So, and April, I gotta give a shout out to April because she's here from old QLD Australia. So welcome, April. It's good to have you here from so far away. I have no idea what time it is there now, but it's either it's early. It's later than it is here, but that means it's earlier somewhere else, if that makes sense. But anyway, so back to the first question here. We've got Connie from Kirkland wants to know how I organize threads. So embroidery threads, I pretty much will keep on a rack like that. I've got actually 3 more racks that are going to be going up in this room soon. I'm doing a kind of a tear apart, rehaul, overhaul, rehab in my sewing space in the next few weeks here. So I should be hanging up the rest of those threads. I do keep them out of direct sunlight though, and that is an important note to remember. With threads, it's really good to keep them sheltered a little bit, kind of baby them a little bit. With synthetic threads like polyester, you're really not going to have an issue with fading, but it's still a good idea to kind of keep them, just a little bit offset. One of the things that you encounter probably like all of us do is dust in the sewing room. So let me show you what my favorite tip is for that. If the threads didn't look so pretty sitting there all by themselves, I would be covering all of them up with thread nets. So what is a thread net? Well, you've probably seen them. If you've gotten a serger, very likely your serger will come with these thread nets. They can be purchased at your local dealer, at your sewing machine shop. And they are really long when they come in like that. So Janice, I'm kind of getting to your question here where you wanted to know if I cover the thread. So this actually becomes my covering, is the thread net. So with these, because they're extra long, they'll go on those big cones if you have a big cone, but you can also just take your scissors and snip them right in half. And then they're perfect for covering any of your spools. This is a little bit oversized, but all of my regular size embroidery spools, let me grab one here. Just like like this works perfect to cover them. Now, how is this preventing the dust? Well, you're still going to get dust, right? It's still going to come. But when the thread net is on there, it's basically going to catch the dust so that when you go to use that thread, you simply pull it off and the dust goes with it. So that's what I recommend. You certainly could cover the whole thing if you wanted to, but these are great and they keep the threads from unspooling, if that's a word, from, drizzling down. And some of your spools will have a special area on the bottom that literally pops open. And if you can see, there's a little groove there. And what I can do with this type of thread is I can literally snap it. These are called snap spools. And then my tail won't fall out. But that takes a little bit of time. So if you want to just pop a thread net on it, that keeps it as well. With the metallic threads that I have, I've been using a lot of the Designs and Machine Embroidery King Star metallic threads. And when I store these on a rack, or sometimes I just set them down next to the machine, I always put a net on these to keep them nice and secure. So Cindy's asking, let's get Cindy's question up here. Do you tuck your wound bobbin inside of the bottom of the thread before hanging on the rack? No, I do not. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to show you the rest of my thread storage, and you're going to see how I store bobbins. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the regular threads next. And regular threads I keep in a drawer. I have a closet that has wire basket drawers, and they're pretty deep. So I have quite a few of these types of containers actually in those drawers, and they're just stacked like that. So all of my regular sewing thread, which is what this is, I do keep them separate, is packed into these boxes. I have a small thread rack that I keep on the wall that for the threads that I'm using right now, or I've got a project that's going to be immediately put into progress, I will take the spool and put it right up on there. But I don't hoard sewing thread. I do tend to hoard embroidery thread. I mean, embroidery thread is different. You need to have a lot of shades for all the different designs that you're doing. When it comes to sewing, generally speaking, I'm going to go out and I'm going to purchase spools of thread as per the project. I'm going to keep black on hand and white on hand and red and tan and cream and gray and all those colors that we use so regularly. In fact, probably those of you that are quilters out there already know this trick, but I'll open this up and just grab a spool of medium gray. Medium gray is probably one of the best thread colors you can have on hand because it's a good blender thread. So it will mix and match with a lot of different colors of fabrics, but also different prints. So quilters, it's a big favorite with quilters because they can use this color thread and not have to worry about when they're piecing what color is matching the seam. It just kind of blends right in and melts into the fabric. Now, I will tell you that this type of container can get a little bit unwieldy sometimes if your thread spools won't fit on the spindle. So in that case, I just drop them in and then just let them stand up there. Or if I start getting extra threads, then I kind of fill it up with that. All right, so that's how I store my sewing threads. And I do have pretty much mostly polyester thread. I'll talk just a little bit more about, I'm trying to grab a big spool here, about sewing thread in just a minute here, but I'll tell you a little bit more about my favorites. But I use 100% good quality, long staple, smooth sewing thread for virtually all of my sewing. Occasionally, I will use cotton, but it's not very common for me to use cotton. And why is that? Well, with cotton threads, they tend to dry out and they will age, whereas polyester thread pretty much, has a forever lifespan. So you don't have to be concerned with that. I did get a question about using cotton thread and using it in uh, projects like quilts, and is it okay to use polyester thread for a quilt? Well, I'm going to say absolutely yes. I'd love to get some of the other thoughts out there of what you think, but it's pretty much your choice. However, let me tell you what the theory is behind using cotton thread for quilting. If you're using cotton fabric, cotton thread, and cotton batting, they will all age together at the same rate. So if you're doing an heirloom quilt that you wanted to have it all kind of just, be the same like that, then that's absolutely fine. And there are times when you want heirloom type stitches call for heirloom weight cotton thread. But for normal standard quilting and any of the quilting that you're going to be doing by machine, I absolutely recommend using polyester. Yes, it is stronger than the cotton, but like I said, the theory with cotton is that it will all age the same. Well, that basically means that the cotton fabric and the cotton batting and the cotton thread are all going to kind of wear out at the same time. So they're going to get more wear. Some people don't want to use polyester on cotton because they think that it actually wears into the fibers. And I have not found that to be the case. I think it would have to be something that, had a lot of abrasion for that to actually happen. So yeah, I think that Lynn says it depends on what you're creating. If it's something that's used in the microwave, great point. That is an excellent point. If you're making bowl cozies, that's on my wanna-do list. We could have a whole show on wanna-do list one of these days. But those are essential for you to make those with all cotton so that you don't have any issues with the microwaves waving and anything that's synthetic. So that is a really, really good point. So, just keep that in mind. Polyester thread, if it's good quality, long staple, what does long staple mean? It means that when the fibers that are spun to make this thread are spun together, they're spun with long fibers, not short fibers. And we've all probably got a spool somewhere, either in our stash or in our memory, that we pulled the thread off and we could see lumps and bumps and clumps in that thread. And what causes that is the short staples or the short fibers being spun together in low quality, generally inexpensive thread. And when that happens, it causes that thread to shred, to fray, and to break more often. And that's the other issue with cotton. If you've got cotton that has been around for a while, it does dry out. How do you tell? Well, if you just put it in your hands and pull on it, if this was an old spool of cotton, it would break immediately. And you see how strong this polyester is? I have to really, really work at it in order to have that break. And I see Celeste is, she's been quilting for decades. Biggest tip is never use rayon on baby or toddler quilts, because if a thread comes undone, it could wrap around a finger and cause damage. Oh, that's really interesting. Rayon is another whole subject. And actually, thread is such a broad subject, I could do a lot more on it. But basically, any of your natural fibers, like rayon and like cotton, are going to be less color fast, and they're also going to be weaker threads. So you need to be aware of that. And that's one of the reasons that I love good quality polyester. Now, I can name names here, I can name brands, and so I will go ahead and do that. I love the Gutermann thread, and it's readily available. So I purchased this type of thread a lot. I also love the Mettler brand. So my local dealer carries Mettler threads in these smaller spools. And when I buy thread, sometimes I'll buy one large one. If it's colors that I'm going to use a lot of, I'll probably buy two or three, especially when it's on sale. But for the smaller ones, I'll usually buy 2 or 3 spools, and I've never really run out when I was making a garment. I've gotten close to, we call that playing chicken with the machine when the thread is really, really close to being empty. But a lot of times I'll just, pick whatever depending where I'm at or what color I can find, because you do find different variations in colors of the different brands of thread. And Cindy wanted to know, what does the microwave do to the polyester thread? Basically, I haven't tried it, so I don't know exactly what it does, and maybe Lynn can answer that question. My understanding is it can literally melt if that microwave is too high, because it's basically generating heat, and polyester is a synthetic, so it could possibly melt. Okay. All right. So what other brand do I like? Well, I really love the dual duty XP thread, made by Coates and Clark. If you've watched some of the It's So Easy TV shows, Coates and Clark sponsored the show. So we always had dual duty thread on hand. And in past years, there was some dual duty, thread that was maybe a little bit iffy, but this is now 100% polyester. And again, it's made from smooth, long staple fibers, and I really, really enjoy using this thread. And again, it's readily available. Okay, and Lynn does have an answer, and so does Donna, that it could, and so does Mary. So a lot of you obviously are clued into that and have made those lovely bowl cozies. I'm still hoping to do one of those. All right, now what about bobbins? Bobbin storage. Well, I do have lots and lots of bobbins, and I do not store them with my thread. Although I think that's a really good idea, I just haven't found a way to put that together in a good place. So I like having my spools separate, and I like having my bobbin thread separate. Now, the one issue with that is you have to be able to tell what's what. Now, again, I don't stock a lot of sewing thread. I tend to buy it for what I need to use it for, and then if it's, there's not that much left, I'll just throw the spool away and, worry about buying that color again or whatever I need. But so I keep my bobbins in these bobbin boxes, and I keep them sorted by type. So this one is all regular sewing thread, and I can pretty readily see, well, this bobbin goes with this particular pink spool of thread. I can recognize that because I'm not I'm not mixing a lot of different ones in here. So I can tell right away which one is going to work. One really simple way that you can store your bobbin with your thread, if you're not trying to fit it into a particular case, is to go out and buy pipe cleaners, and then just take the pipe cleaner and put it through your spool, and then hook it onto the bobbin, twist it together, and you've got a really easy way to keep those together. Sometimes I'll do that when I'm working on a particular project and I want to just set those spools aside, and I don't want things to get lost or to get tangled. Okay. All right. Let's see what Cindy had to say. She does, because she wants the thread to match fabric and wear with it. Yes. That is correct. So I highly recommend these. And I actually paid a visit to my local dealer the other day, and they had a whole bunch of them. So I always recommend, check with your local sewing machine shop first. If you can't find it there, then, head over to the big box. But we need to keep supporting our local sewing. Boy, I'm having trouble with that word tonight. Our local sewing machine shops, so they stay around and they're there when we need them. There are other gizmos and gadgets for connecting bobbins to spools, and you can buy those. That's fine. I just never seem to have enough of them, so I prefer to do it this way. And let's see what Caroline has to say. Caroline says that's her separate. So she does the exact same thing I do, and that works out really, really good for me. Now, there are other bobbins that I have, and those are my embroidery bobbins. So how many of you have ever seen one of these little gadgets? They call it a bobbin bracelet or a bobbin donut. I've heard them called as well, because they're shaped like a donut. These are wonderful. In fact, you could use these for all your bobbin storage, but again, you want to have, you want to keep the dust off of that. So for me, I only use this for my embroidery bobbins, and I do keep it in a drawer. So by doing this, I know these are exactly the bobbins that I need for my particular embroidery machine. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit in a sec, because it's really important when it comes to bobbin thread for embroidery that you choose thread and use thread that is specifically made for use in your machine. I know we like to do bargain shopping, and I know there's a lot of different brands out there. If you find one that works, go for it. But I've over the years, I've seen a lot of embroidery issues in particular that were directly related to using the wrong bobbin thread. So it's very, very important. Again, Brother, I use the Brother bobbin thread a lot. Let me find my spools here. Brother bobbin thread comes in two weights. One is a 60 weight, and the other is a 90 weight. They are really not made to be interchangeable. The 60 weight, if you looked really close on the spool, you would see pictures that show an embroidery and sewing combination machine. So the 60 weight thread is designed for those combination machines. If you have an embroidery only machine, then you want to go ahead and use the 90 weight thread. That's what your machine was designed for. Now, again, if you can find other brands of thread that fit that weight category, go ahead, go for it. Recently, I acquired a beautiful little bobbin cylinder filled with pre-wound bobbins from Designs and Machine Embroidery. Again, they're one of my favorite suppliers for embroidery. These are the exact same size bobbins as my Brother bobbins are, which is they're class 15 is what I use, and they are wound with 60 weight thread. So these would be interchangeable. The difference with these is that these bobbins are disposable. These bobbins are reusable. So Brother does sell pre-wound reusable bobbins. So I can, when I'm done with this, I can use this, for any other thread I want, or wind my own embroidery bobbins, which I do that sometimes too. Sometimes I find it just kind of like a warm-up exercise to start winding your bobbins before you start your embroidery project. But the key here that you want to realize is if you've got disposable bobbins, if you're able to look at them really close, pull one out here. Oh, actually, these are disposable. If you look at them, you will not find the notch that is got like a groove in the bobbin for where it snaps onto your bobbin winder. So that's getting a little bit technical, but that is actually an important point. Yes, very, very, very important to use the right bobbins. And I'm gonna show you a sample of proper bobbin tension in a minute here too. But let's talk about some other little ways that you can store bobbins, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but I'm just like, I'm doing a lot of things at once, and I'm setting a bobbin aside, and I'm maybe not going to put it away. How many of you, raise your hand, guilty as charged, you're sewing along and you're not putting everything away all the time, or you're going to get back to it? Well, a lot of you probably already know about this handy dandy little trick, but you can go to the dollar store and you can buy these hair ties in big bags of, I think they come in like 100. I use them in place of rubber bands a lot of times, but these are wonderful for also containing the thread on your bobbin. You simply wrap it around there just like that. It acts like a sleeve or a sock, and it will just keep that bobbin thread from unraveling. There's more. There's other ideas for that. I've got a whole little separate case that I keep all of my bobbins that are for Bobbin Work embroidery. We're going to talk a little bit more about Bobbin Work embroidery here tonight too. But with these threads, they really unwind very, very quickly and very easily because most of them are slippery and they're thick. So they really need, to be controlled on there. Well, you can find, and you may actually have this, maybe you have some of these and you didn't know what they were there for. These are Bobbin Clips, and these actually came with my Brother machine. They snap right onto the bobbin and keep that thread corralled. So that's another way to do it. If you don't have those and you want to use the little trick for the little hair ties, that works great. So there are lots and lots of different ways. Find the one that works for you and the one that you feel comfortable being consistent with, because that's gonna make all the difference. All right, so I think we covered pretty much all of the thread issues here. It looks like you guys gave some good tips to each other on that too. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the next question. And the next question was from Cindy in Gladwin, Michigan. And Cindy wanted to know kind of like, what is it all about in this big embroidery world? She told me that she was well acquainted with in the hoop embroidery designs. And she also knew what embroidered applique designs looked like, but she was just a little wondering more what constitutes regular embroidery, what's bobbin work, and what does red work mean? So I'm guessing Cindy's probably heard me talk about some of these things and wondered what it all means. So let's cover a little bit of that. Let's see, I've got some samples to show you. So let me start by showing you this one here that I put together. I'm actually going to use another board to put it up on so that you can see it really good here. But I did a sample of what are known as the most common embroidery stitches that make up what we would call a regular embroidery design. And a regular embroidery design is, in most cases, most of the design itself is going to be made up of a what's known as a tatami stitch, otherwise just known as a fill stitch. And if you've watched your machine embroider, you've seen it do this stitch. It fills in the space with little short stitches. So they pretty much always go at an angle. And if you've ever looked at a design and noticed that they use the same color embroidery thread, but in different parts of the design, they used a little different angle to that fill stitch or tatami stitch, you will notice that you get different shading. Now, this is all done just at a 45-degree angle. That whole thing was stitched out just with that 45 degrees. And so it all looks uniform in color. But if I would have done, another section and had that go in a different direction, you would see the way the light is caught on the thread, because the thread, it reflects the light, it would create a little bit of shading, and it could actually look like a little bit of a different color. So that is the tatami fill stitch, which is very, very common. You may also then find a patterned fill. So I'm going to bring this close, and if you can see just a little bit of texture to that one in comparison to the one next to it, looks a little more smooth. You can see just a little texture. So that's what would be called a patterned fill stitch. And it's the same type of stitch action, but it's done in different groupings of those stitches so that it can create almost like a brick type of look or a herringbone look, but it's still a tatami stitch. It's still a standard fill stitch. And then of course we're probably, very familiar with run stitches. And what's a run stitch? It's nothing more than a straight stitch. Plain and simple, it's a straight stitch. So a lot of our embroidery designs have run stitches as outlines or accents, or in areas where you might have a quilting, fancy fill stitches. They're all, if they're done with a straight stitch, it's basically a run stitch. But a run stitch can be done multiple times. And when it's done multiple times, it will literally go around that area from start point to end point and then go back around again. It may go around several times. It may stitch back over on top of itself several times, but it's still a simple run stitch. Now, the next type of stitch that's very, very common in regular embroidery is what's known as a triple stitch, also known as a bean stitch. So a bean stitch is essentially, it's a run stitch as well, but it's a run stitch that doesn't go over 3 times to make 3 stitches. It literally takes 3 stitches by going forward, backward, and forward again. So the name bean stitch is what it's actually called, and it builds up a little bit more thickness to that straight stitch, but those straight stitches are done right on top of each other instead of having to go around and back over again. So that's another very, very common stitch that you find. I'm going to back up for a minute because it looks like Mary has a really good question. How do we get the bobbin holder in brother cases smaller to hold the bobbin? Not exactly sure, Mary Mike B, if you can give me a little more clarification on that. I'm going to answer by saying that you may also be using a bobbin that's shorter. I think that's might be what you mean, the bobbins that are shorted. There are pre-wound bobbins. I don't happen to have any on hand right now, but they're just a few millimeters shorter than the class 15, which is your standard bobbin that is what, sewing thread and embroidery thread goes on if you're fitting it regular. If you have shorter bobbins, you need some sort of bobbin adapter. And this is actually the Brother Bobbin adapter, where you can use the pre-wound bobbins that are shorter, and generally all of those that I've seen are disposable. And how this connects is it goes right into your bobbin case with a magnetic attachment. So I can pop that around and it's not gonna go anywhere. That literally raises that shorter bobbin up to the level that you need for sewing in the for embroidery in the machine. Now let's talk about that for a minute, because I did want to mention there are what are called alternative bobbin cases. If you have an embroidery only machine, obviously you're only going to do embroidery in that. So your bobbin case will be the exact one that you need for that process. However, if you got a combination machine, combination machines will come with a bobbin case installed in the machine. Your machine, when you get it, is set up for sewing, but they'll give you this alternative bobbin case. And the regular bobbin case, you'll find the screw on it is painted. And again, I'm speaking to brother machines because those are what I'm familiar with. Maybe some of you can chime in if you have, some other types of machines, if it's the same type of thing on yours. But the bobbin case that is pre-installed in your machine is designed for both sewing and embroidery. And the reason it has that little bit of green paint on it is because it's basically telling you, don't touch that screw. Okay. You are not supposed to mess with that screw. It's supposed to be set perfectly for sewing, and it should be set very, very, very well for embroidery as well. However, why in the world then did they give you this other bobbin case? This other bobbin case is always marked with some sort of a colored dot on the inside. Mine has a little purple dot. I have seen them in some other colors, so just realize that, the difference is going to be between the green screw and the bobbin case with the color dot in it. These are what I like to call a just in case bobbin case. And when do you need it? Well, if you're embroidering and you're using pre-wound bobbins of, other brand that is not like the brand that's made by your machine manufacturer, the tension may be a little bit different. So this particular bobbin case is designed to be, it's designed to be tighter so that it puts a little bit more pull on that bobbin thread so that you don't risk having the bobbin thread show up on the top of your beautiful embroidery design. How many of you have had that happen to you? I'd love to see in the chat if you would let me know. And it happens to the best of us. Okay, it is caused by multiple different things. It could be a wide variety of things, but generally either the upper tension is too tight or the bobbin tension is too loose. So again, if you're using a bobbin case that's designed specifically for your machine and it's adjusted properly, it should be working perfectly. Well, how do you know if your tension is working perfectly or not? Well, did you know that you can do your own testing? I know this looks like an eye chart, but let me tell you what it is. If you're having issues with your thread and you don't know what's going on, or if your design is working properly, it could be a digitizing issue, although rarely is that the case. You can do a test by stitching out either the letter H, that's my favorite letter to stitch for a test, or an L or a T. And the three H's that you see here were all done with good tension. So again, my machine is set just fine. I really have never used this alternative just in case bobbin case because I haven't needed to. But if I experience an issue where I need that to be tighter, I can change out to that. When I tested this, I'm going to show you the back. If you look at those H's with a properly adjusted tension, you should see about 2/3 of your actual embroidery thread color showing up on the bottom side, and you should see about 1/3 of your bobbin thread showing. That may be a little bit more, it may be a little bit less, but it should be about 1/3. And if you look at all of those, you will see that is exactly the case. All of those letters show just about the right amount of bobbin thread. My top H is a little bit bigger. I enlarged it as per the machine. But when I did that, it makes the stitches just a little bit looser. So when the stitches are just a little bit looser, it does show up on the bobbin side as more of the top thread coming through. Now, I also stitched a T for a tight tension. And with this one, what I did is I tightened the upper tension so that it mimicked what would happen if my bobbin thread was too loose. And it doesn't look too bad on the top, but if you were able to see this really close, you might notice those jagged edges. And then, oh, now I see, well, it does look bad when I look really close. Because what happened is, if we looked at the back, we've got far more than 1/3 of that bobbin thread showing. And the reason it's good to do an H is because you've got, a variety of areas there. With the T, we don't have, we still got the length and the width going, but you can see where it pulled that thread. So that is not going to be a good thing, because if you've had that happen where the white thread shows up on top, it simply means that either your top tension is too tight or your bottom tension is too loose. And sometimes that can be caused by the thread pulling somewhere on the top. And sometimes it can be caused by, the bobbin not being properly set or not having the right thread in there. So what happened on my L? Well, I did the opposite. L for loose. I loosened my upper tension so that I made it too loose. And when you look at the back side of that, we don't see any bobbin thread. And we don't see any bobbin thread because that is way too loose. Okay. So we know that that is a problem. And when we see that, we could also see loops. I've actually got loops there underneath. That could actually lead to a really bad problem that we would call thread nesting. So that is definitely a problem that we don't want to encounter. So we need to be aware of that. And then when we look at the other side, you can actually see my stitches are sloppy here as well. So when that upper thread is too loose, it's going to it's going to make those threads sloppy. Now, let me tell you one of the most common things that causes thread to be too loose, either on top or on the bobbin. It is caused by little bits and pieces of thread that has shredded, broken, frayed, and gotten stuck either in your bobbin case or in the upper tension area of your machine. So you could take a business card and just, put it up and down in the slot of your machine very, very carefully, and you might dislodge that thread. In your bobbin case, you could take a piece of paper, just regular white paper, and just go through the tension disc a little bit and see if you can clean that out and clean out maybe a little bit of thread. If you can't get it out pretty easily, then I'm going to suggest that you take it for service, and they'll be able to take things apart that you can't get into to get into that. And speaking of taking apart, I want to go back up just 1 minute here. If you do take your bobbin case out of your machine to replace it with a new bobbin case or the just in case bobbin case, on the Luminaire, we've got a really easy peasy button. We just snap it. The plate comes off. We can lift that right out, and it's not difficult. But if you have the type that you have to unscrew your throat plate, be very careful in the order that you take that bobbin case out and put it back in. You need to work from the back to the front and keep that same order. So I've actually going to do a whole post on all the tips from this show, and I'll put a link into that post on my letsgosew.com website, and I'll give you pictures and instructions for exactly how to do that. Yes, I know, Janice. It is a bit of a pain to have to unscrew that, but it does need to be done, and it does get dusty underneath there. If your machine ever gets so much lint built up underneath those feed dogs, it will actually stop feeding. So you need to be careful with that. Okay. But definitely take a look when I post everything this weekend on my website, and I add things to the blog. I will add links so that you can see exactly what I'm referring to in some of these instructions, and then you can do it as it should be done. All right. Let's get ready and see what the next one was. Let me take a look at my next question while I didn't bring any tea in here tonight. Okay, I guess I don't get to sip tea tonight. Next one was Margot from Fayetteville, Georgia. And Margot wanted to know more about Osnaburg fabric. So let me go ahead. I'm going to pull up my pictures here. And you can see in that first picture, what I've got is a red work design. I neglected to mention that in my excitement over explaining all of the different stitches. I've neglected to mention bobbin work and red work. Oh, and I'm getting tea delivered to me. Thank you very much. I could use a little sip right about now. So we talked all about those stitches that are the standard embroidery stitches, but what about red work and what about bobbin work? That was I'm going to back up here. That was Cindy's question. All right. So Cindy, you saw the regular stitches, and now let's just touch on what a red work design is. A red work design is what you see on that towel there, and it's just simply running stitches that are, again, they may go back over an area more than once. A red work design is just made up of very simple, basic straight stitches, possibly a little bit of detailing. Let's see if I had another towel there. No, that's a different one. Just a little bit of detailing, but it mimics what we used to have with red work, which was hand done with red embroidery floss. There's a whole history to that as well. But the red work could also be known as blue work, could also be known as black work, could be a variety of different stitches. But in embroidery designs, a red work design is very simply made up of straight stitches, very open, and really ideal for doing on towels. And Josie likes the pumpkins. We'll get to that in just a minute, Josie. All right, so bobbin work. What in the world is bobbin work? Well, bobbin work is, again, embroidery or sewing that is done with bobbin weight thread, and it's another whole ball game. There are bobbin work designs that might be built into a machine. Bring this back up so you can see. This is an example of a bobbin work design. It's done with the thicker thread, and it's always done with a straight stitch that does not tie off and does not go back on top of itself. The stitches are longer, and they're generally not a lot of sharp points in the design. There may be a little bit, but a lot of gentle curves makes up for a beautiful bobbin work embroidery design. Bobbin work could also be done on the sewing side of the machine. So again, speaking of tea towels, and then this would be another example of a red work style design with a little bit of extra detailing in it. But this was done on the sewing side of the machine with a decorative stitch and that thicker, heavier thread in the bobbin. Again, I've got a whole tip sheet on that, which I will link in the blog post that coordinates with this show, so that you can learn more about it. But they all are different types of stitching. All right, so let me zip back here to the question about Osnaburg cloth. Okay, Margot, you've probably, I'm going to guess that you have seen perhaps a project or two that I have done with Osnaburg cloth. So this was done actually, I think last year, and it was featured the Brother Free Design of the Month, which was the pumpkin design that you see there. And I wanted to make just a simple table topper, and I love working with Osnaburg cloth. So what in the world is it? That's what I used for this project. It's a little bit like muslin, but it has a looser weave. So I'd love to hear in the comments, has anybody here used Osnaburg cloth? Are you familiar with it? Have you seen it? Is it in your local store? Do you have any in your stash? I like it so much that I actually purchased a whole bolt of it because it's a great basic fabric and a good neutral fabric to use when I want to do, anything similar to this. So what in the world do I use it for? I've used it for curtains. It's great for curtains. It seems to want to be married to Cluny lace, a natural looking lace, because they just, they both have that kind of homespun look. It fringes really well. So if you look on the next picture that I have her, you could see before I sewed all those little pumpkin patches to the table topper, I actually frayed all of those edges. I stitched a stitch around the edge and then pulled the threads up to that stitching line so that it would have a really nice frayed look. So it just has that, again, that really homespun look. It's darker than muslin and it has more flex in it than muslin, but you're generally speaking going to find it near the muslin section. It's actually manufactured by a company called Rocklon, who makes all the muslins practically that are out there that you see made in the USA. And it's got those beautiful little brown flecks that gives it really a nice homespun character. It's also good for making tea towels. I will use just a single layer and make a tea towel. You could make a double layer if you want to, and it's great for making your own fabric napkins as well. Oh, Celeste, that's interesting. Celeste says that she uses it for entredo. Great idea there. Let me see. Yeah, that is a great idea. Still learning these controls here. Anything for entredo, and entredo is done when you use a wing needle. Subject for another show. I actually have a post coming out very soon that should have some entredeaux mixed into it. But entredeaux is done with a needle called a wing needle, and that needle has a big, thick blade on it. So it pushes apart the fibers of the thread and creates an open, lacy look. So thank you for that idea, Celeste. That is a really, really good one. And Lisa has a great question. Shrinkage. Yes, it does shrink a little bit. So I recommend if you're doing a project of any size whatsoever, that you should pre-wash it first and dry it in a hot dryer, and then obviously iron it before you use it. Yeah. Thanks for that comment. That is a great way to use it as well for garments, lightweight shirts. It's also used for period clothing. So if somebody's doing things that they want to recreate something that was worn in the early American days, Osnaburg really lends itself really, really well to that. So yes, you do need to be aware of the shrinkage factor, and you do want to wash it. And Cindy, as far as it looking like burlap, mm, maybe a little bit in the way that it has that that kind of textured look, but it's really a very lightweight fabric, not super lightweight, but it has it doesn't have the same thickness, and it doesn't have the itchiness that burlap does. So as far as having that nice homespun look, though, they are very, very comparable. And then Becky wants to know, does it wrinkle? Yeah, a little bit, but not too bad, actually. It's again, if you looked at the label from the manufacturer, which is Rocklon Industries, they actually say that it's permanent press. Now, that's kind of a loose term because we've all bought muslin that is permanent press as well. And it's really, that just means that it doesn't wrinkle really horribly bad. But it will, it's cotton, so it is going to wrinkle a little bit. But it's a good quality cotton. And if you've ever bought cheap cotton, like quilt weight cotton, and then you've bought good quality cotton from the quilt shop, and when you wash it and dry it, you have very little ironing to do. That's how Osnaburg is. That's how I would compare Osnaburg. Was it used a while back for needlework? Well, Celeste says she's used it for entredeaux. So entredeaux could be done by hand as well, or hardanger work. That may be what you're thinking of, Patty. But it lends itself really, really, really well to machine embroidery as well. You do need to stabilize it. And Daria, that is a great question. Yes, you do need to stabilize it. And in this particular case, I'm not exactly remembering what I used on here, but I'll give you my general rule. And I promise in my next session, when I do the rest of the Q&As, there's going to be a lot more on embroidery and stabilizer. So hang on for that show to come. But generally, when I do cotton, I like to, first of all, stiffen it and starch it. So that could mean using ordinary spray starch. If you use ordinary spray starch, though, and you've had any experience with that, you're going to have to spray, iron, spray, iron, spray, iron, spray, iron, probably about 5 times, believe it or not, before you get that built up. The other issue with regular spray starch is it does tend to build up on the plate of your iron. So a lot of us have been using Best Press, and Best Press is kind of a light starch. So you still need to keep spraying and keep ironing. You won't get a real crisp finish with the what did I just say? With the Best Press. The Best Press is nice for a finished coat, but it doesn't really give you the stiffness that you need. So what do you go to next? Well, the next step up from that would be something likeTerial Magic. And Terrial Magic is very popular now, so you shouldn't have trouble finding it. But that is going to really give your fabric, your cotton fabric, almost like a papery feel. So if my design isn't too dense and isn't too heavy, some or all of that starch, to some degree, will stiffen it up and make it perfectly suitable for embroidery. If not, then another one of my favorite things to do is to add a fusible backing. So if I'm going to be doing a quilt design, and it's going to be quilted anyway, I'm probably going to add a fusible batting to the back of my cotton in order to give it more body. Another option would be to add a layer of fusible interfacing. I have found that on cotton fabrics, for me personally, most of the standard stabilizers that we use on t-shirts, sweatshirts, and things like that just don't quite do what they need to do for cotton fabrics. Quilt weight cotton can be one of the trickier types of fabrics to embroider on because it is thin and it is usually relatively dense. Yeah, I'm with you, Carrie. I love Best Press. All right, so let me get back to my questions here. Moving along. Jan wants to know how to neatly end a serger seam. So let's get off of that Osnaburg and let me walk you through the process for this. And I'm going to actually add a little short video of the steps that I'm showing in images to the blog post so that you can see this all blended together. But what I did is I took off the presser foot on the serger so that you could see if you needed to start neatly on your fabric, what you need to have set up on your serger. You need to have what's called the stitch finger, which is right here in this area, right below the needles, where you see little metal prongs. You need to have that stitch finger clear of thread. So it's called clearing the stitch finger. And you do that by simply raising your presser foot, pulling a little bit of slack in your needle thread, and then pulling on your thread chain. That will disengage it from the fingers and will cause your threads to not be wrapped on those fingers anymore. So your fingers are now clear. Then when you put in your fabric, it would actually start with the stitch forming right on the actual fabric. So I don't think I have a picture of that, but when you want to then end, so that's how you would start neatly. When you want to end at a precise spot, you want to go through the same process. So here you actually see me pulling a little bit of slack on the needle thread. The next step, see, I might have these mixed up picture-wise. Yeah, the next step then would be to raise the presser foot and pull the thread off the back. When you do that, you've released it, and you can go ahead, see if I have another picture of that. You can go ahead then and chain off for the rest of that that stitching, that seam. So if you look really close, you can barely see. I think I might have another picture of that there. Well, you could see there where I ended precisely by clearing the stitch finger and then pulling that off. And then I'll pull myself back up here and I'll show you what it looks like on camera where I have joined those threads together. Now, in order to do that, you're going to need to stop. So I'm going to bring up this picture one more time. Just before the point where you're going to overlap. And at that point, you are going to need to do something very, very important. I wonder if anybody can guess what it is. You are going to need to disengage your cutting blade. So that may mean that you need to actually open the front door of your machine and get that blade out of the way. Because if you don't do that and you continue up to the point where you overlap, which I overlapped there just a few stitches, you would have cut into your previous threads. Okay. So this is a really, really important tip to know and to put into practice. I think, Jan, you wanted to do it on, you were maybe doing pant hems and you wanted to serge finish the raw edge of that pant hem and then be able to get that off of there neatly and nicely. So now you're left with a tail thread. So I'm going to go ahead and bring myself back up here and show you that tail thread. If you want to really end neatly, what you will do with that tail thread is you will just take it, and I've already done it, but I just wrap it around my finger and stick the tail through and pull it, and then use your fingernails to just slide that knot down to the end. You have now completely secured that thread. So think about this. If you were going to do serge finishing maybe on a placemat or a napkin or any type of a blanket, a decorative finish, if you use this process, you will have a very, very neat ending. It will be very hard to tell where you stopped and started. I used a contrasting thread so that you could see it really, really good. Now what we need to do is deal with this thread tail. So I like to cut it so it's about an inch or two long. And then I use what's known as a loop turner. This is designed for turning spaghetti straps inside out, but it works really good for this. I will take it and I'm going to slide it underneath the stitches. I'll show it to you once I get it slid underneath. Just like that. And then I'm going to take the hook that is open. I'm going to close it up just like that. And I'm going to pull that thread tail underneath my stitches until I can grab that loose end. Of course, it's always tricky to do when you're doing it a few inches away from yourself. But I'm going to be able to pull that tail and literally bury it on the wrong side. So everything is completely secured. I can completely clip those free ends and neaten that up. And that serger stitch is going nowhere. It's going to be nice and neatly finished and very, very secure. So knowing how to clear that stitch finger is a really, really important, very, very important process. All right, let me get over here and see what was my next question. Oh, Patty asked about choosing and using various serger stitches. So again, that's a little bit of a big topic, but I'll tell you just really quick on my serger. Most of the time when I'm using it just for clean finishing edges, or if I'm sewing seams, I use a three thread stitch when I'm sewing a seam on knits, or when I'm just clean finishing or serge finishing a seam that has already been sewn, or a seam that I've sewn on woven fabrics. I use a 4-thread stitch, which means I'm using both needles in the serger when I want to do an entire seam on a woven fabric. On knits, I get a little bit more flexibility by leaving that one needle out, and you get a little bit more stretchiness to your seam. So 3-thread for knits, 4-thread for wovens, 3-thread for edge finishing. Rolled hem is another whole topic again. She asked, Patty asked basically what the difference is between rolled hem on a serger and a rolled hem on the sewing machine as far as when you would choose which one. Well, my basic short answer is if you want that rolled hem, which is a very narrow hem, turned under with a very narrow amount of fabric rolled to the wrong side. If you want that to be very low key, you don't really want it to show up, then you want to use a rolled hem on your sewing machine, because that's just done with a straight stitch, and that will basically, by using matching thread, blend into your fabric. If, however, you want a showy hem, then I would use the rolled hem on your serger, because that is going to give you a decorative finish. And of course, if you use contrast thread or thread that shows up really well, you're going to be able to really see that, and it's going to be an accent on your project rather than having something that just kind of fades away and disappears on it. And then Cindy, you're asking about a cover hem machine. If I do have a cover hem machine, I don't use it as much as probably I should, because I haven't done a lot of hems on knits recently, and that's really what it's ideally suited for, although it has decorative purposes as well. But a workaround, and one I use often, is setting up the machine for a 4mm stretch twin needle. That will give you a very similar look on the top of your fabric, although I will tell you that a cover hem has more stretchability to it, and has the characteristic loops that you see on ready-mades, and you can use those loops either on the top of your fabric or on the bottom of your fabric. So I've got a cover hem project that I will link in the blog so that you can see that as well. And Cindy, I believe you also asked me a question about cover hem stitching issues. If you have a cover hem machine and you're experiencing skip stitches, we'll go back to the whole thought about thread. Good quality thread makes a world of difference. So check your thread, check your needles. If you're threading your machine properly and you've got good needles and good thread and you're still having skip stitches, then it's probably a case of the timing being a little bit off on your machine. And that is the same on a sewing machine, a serger, or a cover hem machine. And that requires a technician to tweak it and make it right for you. All right, we are winding down here to the last couple questions. So let me see what the next one. Lucy wanted to know how to keep decorative stitches sewing in a straight line. Well, that's a great question. If you're doing decorative stitches, especially on the type that have a wider than your throat plate opening, this is a decorative stitch from the Brother Luminaire, and it's a 12 millimeter wide stitch. So the throat plate is only 7 millimeters, but the machine is actually, the feed dogs are moving side to side and forward and backward in order to produce this stitch. And it can be really tricky to keep those straight in line. So my recommendation for you is to do a couple things. First of all, draw a center line, and this works for all decorative stitching. If you have a pattern that has a lot of swirl to it, no matter what machine you're using it on, and you have trouble kind of keeping it on the straight and narrow, draw a center line, line that up with the center point on your decorative foot. Make sure you switch to the decorative foot that's required for your machine because that has a deeper opening on the underside. And then draw yourself 2 parallel lines, one on the right and one on the left. And as you're guiding this through the machine, you really want to watch that all of those lines are kind of staying parallel. If you start to see a little bit of a turn, you'll notice it because you've got those additional lines. Another thing you can do is if you have the grid line feature, like the Luminaire has the grid line feature, you can turn on the grid lines and you can match those grid lines to the lines that you've drawn. And again, that will help you create a visual, almost like a, like a fence on each side that will really, really improve. When I did the stitching, that's exactly what I did. I drew those 2 lines and then I lined up my grid lines on either side so that I could keep that going straight and smooth through the machine. And I will add some extra pictures to the blog for that as well. All right, what do we got next here? We're almost done here. We only got 2 more. Cindy Bass asked me, what is the most difficult sewing challenge I've been asked to do? Well, this could be a long, a long history of different things throughout the years. I will tell you, when I was just barely out of my teens, I was working in a custom drapery factory, and the owner of the company asked me to make the mother of the bride dress for his wife, who actually worked there as well, out of imported velvet that came from Europe. And at that time, I'm remembering it was about $80 a yard, which I don't even know what that would translate to today. And she wanted a full length dress and a matching cape, and making it out of that velvet. There was no turning back, no ifs, ands, or buts about using that fabric and getting more if something went wrong. So that was a big challenge. I'm happy to say it came out beautiful, perfect. Everything worked out really, really well. So some other things that I've had though in more recent days, I actually got a couple pictures for you of that. Over the years, I've done a lot for Brother, making different samples. And this particular jacket was a real challenge because they wanted me to embroider the lapels, and I wasn't able to take anything apart. So I ended up doing the lapels on netting. Believe it or not, it was just a beige netting, and then doing all the embroidery on that netting, attaching it to the lapels, and then trimming away the excess. So it actually, I made a lapel pattern and basically added that netting. When it came time to do, I think I got another picture here, the bottom of the jacket here, these were a couple other challenging ones I'll tell you about in a second. But I did have to take apart the lining for that. So you can see I, took it apart as far as I could, and I literally had to tape down the fabric in the hoop to keep it from getting in the way and flopping back up. Before I stitched any of that, I did a test on yellow felt to get all my colors down, because again, there was no turning back on that. But I'll just flip back to the other picture. Samples that I've made for Brother that have been used in brochures. Again, a lot of times a one-of-a-kind item. This dress was shipped to me. This jacket was shipped to me. They were ready-made, so they had to be done just right. And getting that lined up, knowing that they wanted a contrast color and was going to be on that model, I had to have perfect placement for sure. So we'll add some tips in for perfect placement in the next show. The jacket, although it doesn't look difficult, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the front. The front had about 10 times more embroidery on it than the back did. And so when I did stitched on that, it was a real challenge, because I ended up having to hold the fabric on the machine just to, have that jacket not flop around. And I did stitch directly on the actual jacket. So that was a little on the tricky side. All right. And last but not least, Cindy's question. Cindy asked me how I find inspiration for my design collections. And Cindy was speaking primarily, she had asked me about my Wrapped in Embroidery book, which has got 9 machine embroidered wraps and scarf projects in it. And then it's got a CD with all of these embroidery designs. Now, I don't do digitizing. I basically created all the garments, created all the layouts, all the placement, all the pieces and parts, but then I had a professional digitize it. So when I'm looking for designs, I like to find designs that I'm not finding anywhere else. I mean, why reinvent the wheel, so to speak? So I wanted for this particular collection, for this book, to have classic designs that would really work well, again, on, classic kind of garments and things that you would, of course, be able to use, in other places, but designs that would go on these wraps and would have a real kind of clean, classic look, and designs that could be linked together. So I looked for something, like I said, classic, and wasn't available anywhere else. For my most recent collection, which is my Just Jackets collection, you can see a couple jackets behind me. Again, I wanted something that I couldn't find really anywhere else. So yes, there are embroidery designs out there that are roses, but I wanted roses that were both in big, small, and teeny tiny, because I wanted to be able to fill the spaces on the jacket with, areas of buttonholes and cuffs, and have coordinating designs that would all go with those same roses, but be be in the smaller size, and then some in the medium size, and then some things that could be done, like you see on the jacket back here, that could be done larger. So the roses, the full part motifs, and then the stars all include designs that coordinate together in both small, medium, larger, and itty bitty designs. So that really just kind of, inspires me when I can find something that is going to be different and unusual, and yet is going to be something that hopefully my machine embroidery friends are going to enjoy using on a variety of projects. All right, so before we wrap up, I'll just kind of peek through the chat here, see if I can find any other last minute questions. And Janice, do I have a multi-needle machine? Yes, I do. I am fortunate to have my own 6-needle machine, and I use it a lot, but there are times when I prefer to have my fabric laying out flat on my home embroidery machine. So I tend to use my multi-needle for the things that I can't hoop properly on my flatbed machine, tote bags, hats, anything that needs to go over that tubular arm. And I also use it a lot when I need to make samples, when I'm testing out designs and testing out thread colors, because I can get 6 all threaded up at once. So that makes it really, really easy. And let's see, maybe send me an answer to a question about the plastic half loops that clip together. Need to get it tighter. Okay, I assume, Mary, you are talking about, trying to find the ones that I showed here, these little clips there. They're pretty much as is. So if they're not tight enough for what you're doing, I don't think you're gonna find a way to tighten these down. So let me know if that's what you were asking about. They're just really made just to fit around that bobbin and cover up that thread. Whew. Well, I covered a lot. I actually went a little longer than I intended. So I thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. And thank you for answering questions in the chat. I have taken everybody's name from the list of questions that were sent in, and I will be doing a prize drawing. I will announce that on my blog. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is watch for my email. My email comes out on Saturday nights. Some of you read it on Sunday morning because it comes out late on Saturday night. And I will let you know when the blog post is all finished with additional material that relates to what we did tonight. And if you would leave a comment on that blog post, I will also enter your name in for a drawing. I'm going to be giving away a collection of 6 It's So Easy TV tapes, DVDs, so you can watch from the comfort of your own home. So thank you all for being with me tonight. Until we meet again, I wish you a world full of pretty stitches. See you soon. Good night.